The ugliness of human nature is always exposed in criminal cases. Let's explore and study the human nature revealed in these cases together. In TV shows and movies, criminal profiling is often depicted as an almost magical skill. In reality, it's a controversial method of criminal analysis. Although it's widely used around the globe, it's often criticized as pseudoscience lacking empirical research and evidence. Yet there are many instances where it has indeed been of great assistance in solving cases. Today, we're going to recount a heart-stopping series of kidnappings to illustrate how an astonishingly accurate criminal profile was created. The detective who conducted this profiling is also the inspiration for the protagonists in the American TV series Criminal Minds and Mindhunter. This series of kidnappings occurred in Lexington County, South Carolina, in the southeastern United States. It's a historic and beautiful small town, a safe and tranquil place that values traditional family values, where the vast majority of residents are Christians. On the afternoon of May 31, 1985, Robert Smith was working in his study on the second floor of his home. The Smith family lived in the suburbs, with their house nestled in a quiet grove of trees, about 656 feet from the main road, Platte Springs Road. Robert Smith was a pastor, and he had 3 children with his wife, Hilda, Dawn, Sharon Faye Smith, and their son, little Robert. The Smith family was a close and loving one, well respected in the community. Sharon, born on June 25, 1967, was a lively and cheerful young lady with beautiful golden curls, rosy skin, and a soft, sweet voice. Not only was she academically excellent, but she also had a talent for music. She was about to graduate from the well-known Lexington High School, with the graduation ceremony scheduled for 2 days later, on June 2nd, where Sharon was to sing the national anthem as a student representative. After the graduation ceremony, Sharon planned to go on a cruise with her friends for a graduation trip. For her, everything was so beautiful and full of hope. This channel posts a variety of cases every day. If you're interested, be sure to hit that subscribe button and like the content. It's the best support you can offer. May 31st was a bright and sunny day. Sharon, her boyfriend Richard, and a few other classmates attended a graduation pool party. Afterward, the young couple said goodbye in the city center, and Richard watched his girlfriend's car drive away before heading home himself. Sharon was a well-behaved and considerate girl who always kept her family informed of her whereabouts. But Robert still unconsciously kept looking out the window. At 3:38 p.m., his daughter's blue car finally came into view, turning from the main road into the driveway in front of their house. Robert completely relaxed, focusing on his work, and happily thinking that soon the hall downstairs would be filled with his daughter's cheerful laughter. 5 minutes passed. 10 minutes passed, but Sharon still hadn't come inside. Robert looked out the window again and saw that Sharon's car was still parked at the end of the driveway. Robert immediately felt that something was wrong, but what he worried about was his daughter's health. Sharon had a rare condition called diabetes insipidus, which required her drink a lot of water and urinate frequently, and she always carried her medication with her. So Robert's first reaction was that his daughter had fainted from dehydration due to the heat, so he rushed downstairs, jumped into his car, and sped towards his daughter's car along the driveway. When Robert anxiously jumped out of the car, he found the situation was worse than he had imagined. Sharon's car door was wide open, and the engine was still running, with Sharon's bag on the passenger seat. On the dirt road from the car door to the Smith family's mailbox, there was a trail of barefoot footprints, suggesting that Sharon had just stopped by the mailbox, barefoot, to pick up the mail from home. However, there was only one direction of footprints, no tracks back, only a few pieces of mail scattered beside the mailbox, and Sharon's bag was still on the passenger seat. In the peaceful small town bathed in the afternoon sun, Sharon Smith vanished into thin air right in front of her home. Robert and his wife Hilda immediately called the police. At that time, there was no Amber Alert system for missing children, but the Lexington County Police demonstrated strong execution. Sheriff James Metz immediately organized the largest-scale search in South Carolina's history, mobilizing helicopters, setting up a 24-hour temporary command post, and widely soliciting information in the media. In addition to almost all law enforcement personnel in the county, more than 1,000 residents voluntarily assisted, yet they found nothing. The police quickly ruled out the possibility of involvement by the Smith family and other related individuals. From the scene of the crime, it appeared that Sharon was abducted the moment she got out of the car to pick up the mail. Sheriff James Metz realized that he was not facing a simple case. He needed help. Criminal profiling was still an emerging technology at the time. It was only in 1978 that the FBI officially approved a behavioral science unit to provide criminal psychological profiling consultations for law enforcement personnel across the country. It wasn't until 1985 that the Behavioral Analysis Unit, often featured in TV shows, was established. Adding to this, the long-standing aversion and distrust of local departments towards the FBI meant that many local police were reluctant to seek help from the FBI. Fortunately, the Lexington County Police did not have such reservations. Metz immediately called the FBI's South Carolina Columbia field office and the Quantico headquarters in Virginia, requesting informal assistance. On the morning of June 1st, Special Agent John Vollmer from the Columbia field office arrived in Lexington. But even a professional like Vollmer was deeply puzzled by the case. The sudden disappearance of a girl like Sharon usually falls into three scenarios. First, running away from home or being lured away, but Sharon, being a good student and well-behaved, never associated with dubious individuals. She was happy and satisfied with her life, and since she had to carry her medication at all times, there seemed to be no reason for her to leave home abruptly. The second possibility is that she was killed and her body hidden or destroyed, creating the illusion of a disappearance. In this case, the biggest suspect for a low-risk victim like Sharon would be her family. But the Smith family had a close and harmonious relationship, and their anxiety and concern over Sharon's disappearance were genuine. According to the timeline established by the police, they simply did not have the time to commit the crime. The third possibility is that she was kidnapped. Although such stories are common in TV shows, the actual proportion of kidnappings by strangers is quite low in reality. In cases of missing minors, the proportion of kidnappings by non-family members is only 1.5%. The motive of the kidnapper is also puzzling. The purpose of kidnapping is usually one of two types: to use it as leverage to obtain money, revenge, or to express a certain position, political or religious. Although the Smith family lived a comfortable middle-class life, they were by no means wealthy, and they had no deep-seated grudges against others. The only thing worth kidnapping for was their influence in the community, which might make them a target. But the problem is, if it were this type of kidnapper, they would have contacted the victim's family or the media in the first place, demanding a ransom or expressing a position. But 2 days after Sharon's disappearance, no one had contacted the Smith family. If it were the second type of kidnapper, then Sharon's whereabouts might be lost forever, as this type is usually traffickers or sex offenders who want the victim themselves. Agent Vollmer quickly synchronized all the crime scene photos and information to the Quantico headquarters, and the agents there agreed with his view. Someone had kidnapped Sharon, a person who was bold and experienced, definitely a dangerous individual, but at that time, no one knew the kidnapper's motive. 48 hours had passed since Sharon's disappearance, and the large-scale search by the Lexington County Police had not stopped. The police installed a signal tracking system on the Smith family's phone and arranged for officers to keep watch overnight. All the Smith family could do was wait. The feeling of helplessness and loss of control was unbearable. They were anxious and desperate. Even a call demanding a ransom would have been better. Robert later recalled, "As a father and the protector of the family, for the first time in my life, I felt a sense of failure." On June 3, 1985, at 2:30 a.m., the kidnapper made the first phone call. The caller was a strange man with a peculiar voice, likely altered by some device. He demanded to speak with Sharon's mother, Hilda. "Sharon is with me." Then the man gave a detailed description of Sharon's clothing, saying that under her blouse and sweatpants, she was wearing a black and yellow swimsuit for the pool party, a detail never released to the media, confirming that this man was indeed the kidnapper. Hilda pleaded with him, mentioning her daughter's condition, diabetes insipidus, and the need for regular hydration and medication. The caller told her that Sharon was doing well, had eaten a little, drunk plenty of water, and was watching TV with him. He then informed Hilda that they would receive a letter later and that he would contact them again before hanging up. Throughout the call, the man never mentioned a ransom. At that time, the technology was limited and the phone tracking system needed 15 minutes to pinpoint a location accurately. By the time the police had located the call to a phone booth 20 kilometers from the Smiths' home and rushed there, the caller had long since vanished. Officers stationed at the Smiths' home immediately contacted Agent Vollmer. He and the Lexington County Police went to the post office, woke up the sleeping postmaster, and checked the unsorted mail one by one. Soon they found the letter. Up to this point, the police still held a glimmer of hope that although the kidnapper had not mentioned a ransom in the call, he might give instructions in the letter. However, when they opened the letter, they knew things were grim. The letter was 2 pages long, written on yellow notepad paper. No forensic expert was needed to compare handwriting. Robert recognized it at a glance. It was Sharon's handwriting. At the top of the letter was the time of writing, 3:10 a.m. on June 1, 1985, with "I love you all" in the upper right corner. Several underlines emphasized the message, followed by the title of the letter, Last Will and Testament. Mom, Dad, Robert, Dawn, Richard, and all my dear friends and family, I love you. I will soon be with the Lord, so please don't worry. Just remember my smart and lively nature and all the wonderful times we've shared. Don't let this ruin your lives. Live for the Lord every day, and good things will come from it, and I will always be with you. I really love you all so much. I'm sorry, Dad. I have to swear. Please forgive me. Dear Richard, I love you so much and will always cherish the beautiful memories we've had. I ask you one thing. Accept the Lord as your Savior. My family has had a profound impact on my life. I'm sorry for all the money you've spent on me. If I've ever let you down, I'm sorry. I just want to make you proud because I've always been truly proud of my family. Mom, Dad, Robert, Dawn, Richard, I have so much I want to say to you. I should have said it a long time ago. I love you. I know you all love me and will miss me terribly, but if you support each other, as we've always done, then you will surely get through this. Please don't be sad. Those who love the Lord will have a good ending. I love you all with all my heart, forever. Nana, I love you so much. I always thought I was your best friend, and you are my best friend. I love you all. This was a heart-wrenching letter that particularly worried the police. Was it because she knew when she wrote the letter that when she was found again, she would be unrecognizable? It's unimaginable what kind of emotions the girl had when she wrote this letter, yet even so, Sharon wrote this will with the greatest courage and love. There was not a word of resentment or curse in it. Even the blank spaces were filled with smiley faces and hearts. This letter was quickly sent to the South Carolina Law Enforcement Crime Laboratory, and a copy was sent to the Behavioral Analysis Unit headquarters. On the other hand, the police installed a recording device on the Smith's phone again. If the kidnapper called again, the device would record all the conversations. Although the Smiths were desperately holding on to the last hope, still looking forward to a miracle, both the Lexington County Police and the FBI agents were convinced at this time that Sharon had been killed. That afternoon, the Smith family received another call from the same man. He demanded that the police halt the large-scale search and assured the distraught Hilda that they would hear from Sharon in 2 or 3 days. That night, the man called again, continuing to hint that he would soon release Sharon, and then he said something like this: "I have to tell you something else. Sharon is now a part of me, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. We have become one. So you must do as we say. God will bless us all." On June 4th, the man called again, and this time it was Sharon's sister, Dawn, who answered. The man vividly described to her how he had forced Sharon into his car at gunpoint when she was getting the mail. He then said, 4:58 a.m. No, I'm sorry. Wait a minute. Oh, it was Saturday, June 1st at 3:10 a.m. She wrote the letter you received with her own hand. This slip of the tongue made the FBI and the police shudder even more. The time when Sharon wrote the letter should indeed be 3:10 a.m. on June 1st, consistent with the time marked on her letter. So what about 4:58 a.m.? Then the man told the Smith family that they would soon see Sharon and thoughtfully suggested that they call an ambulance to be on standby. Then he comforted them by saying, "Rest well tonight. Good night." At noon on June 5th, the man called again. This time he gave Hilda a detailed route, claiming, "We are waiting there. God has chosen us," and hung up. Sheriff Metz and other officers immediately set out, and Hilda also wanted to go with them, but the police firmly refused her request. They had already foreseen what they would find. At the location mentioned by the man behind an abandoned white house in Saluda County, 8 neon miles away from the Smiths' home, the police found Sharon's unrecognizable body, and the kidnapping case officially escalated to a murder case. Sharon was still wearing the clothes she had on when she was kidnapped, and the forensic doctor estimated that she was killed within 12 hours after the abduction. The high temperature in June had caused the body to severely decay, making it impossible to determine the exact time of death, but the police were convinced that the killer's slip of the tongue should be the real time of Sharon's death, 4:58 a.m. on June 1st. That is to say, when the killer first called the Smiths, claimed that Sharon was still alive, and kept giving them hope, Sharon had actually been dead for nearly 2 days. The police believe that the reason the killer delayed the discovery of the body, in addition to the pleasure of manipulating the police and the victim's family, was also a sophisticated counter-investigation technique. Because the body was exposed to high temperatures for several days and severely decayed, no key forensic evidence could be obtained. The police could not determine whether Sharon had been sexually assaulted, or even determine the cause of her death. However, they found some adhesive residues of insulating tape on Sharon's mouth, nose, and hair, but the tape itself had been torn off by the killer. The forensic doctor speculated that Sharon likely died of asphyxiation. One can imagine the heartbreak of the Smith family, but the killer did not stop tormenting them. On June 6th, as the Smith family was making funeral arrangements for their daughter, the man called again. This time the call was a toll call, and he specifically asked to speak with Dawn. The man told Dawn that he would turn himself in the next morning and that he was considering suicide. Then, with feigned sincerity, he begged Dawn for forgiveness, claiming he didn't want to kill Sharon, and then he said, I just wanted to have sex with Dawn. I've been watching her for several days. Dawn interrupted him. You wanted to have sex with who? Oh, I'm sorry. With Sharon. I've been watching her for several weeks. Well, things just got out of control. This was the first time the killer confused Sharon with Dawn. The two sisters were close in age, looked alike, and were both cheerful and beautiful blondes. Clearly, with Sharon's death, Dawn had become his new object of interest. On the day of Sharon's funeral, the killer called the Smith family again. Not only did this call, like the previous ones, require the Smiths to pay, but even more cruelly and sadistically, the killer had the operator tell Dawn, who answered the phone, that the caller was Sharon Faye Smith. The man claimed once again that he would turn himself in, and then he began to describe in a very flat and casual tone the details of his sexual assault on Sharon. Even the FBI agents who later analyzed these recordings were extremely disgusted by these words, but Dawn insisted on not hanging up the phone. The man then spoke to Dawn about Sharon's death. Did she know she was going to die? Hilda, who was listening in, asked with a trembling voice. Of course, the man replied, smugly telling them that it was Sharon who chose the time of her death. He also generously let Sharon choose from being shot, poisoned, or suffocated, and Sharon chose the last one. He then sealed her mouth and nose with tape and watched her slowly suffocate to death. Why did you have to kill her? Dawn was now crying uncontrollably. Things got out of control. I was scared. I don't know why. Only God knows. After that, the man did not call again. As with the previous calls, the phone trace failed. Sheriff Metz recalled, We were close several times, almost caught him, but every time he slipped through our fingers. Copies of these phone recordings and new evidence were continuously sent to the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit headquarters. The agents there admired the Smith family's strength and restraint during the calls, and they began to build a preliminary profile of the unknown killer. What kind of profile would the FBI make, and how accurate would it be? Will the police catch this cruel and narcissistic criminal? The victim's suicide note contains important clues, and the killer's characteristics are astonishingly consistent with the criminal profile. In simple terms, the so-called criminal profile is an analysis of the unknown criminal's modus operandi based on big data and probabilities to outline a profile of the criminal, including appearance, ethnicity, age, and so on. Although law enforcement has used forensic methods to infer the characteristics of the killer from the crime scene evidence as early as the Jack the Ripper case, it was not until the 1940s that the police began to pay more attention to the study of criminal profiling. However, during that period, most of the assistants to the police were part-time psychologists, and it was not until the 1970s and 1980s that departments specializing in profiling methods appeared. Behind the increasing emphasis on criminal profiling is actually the emergence of a new type of crime pattern. Traditional criminal investigation methods follow the method of starting with the victim, looking for motives, looking for suspects. But if it is a criminal who has no connection with the victim and the motive is unclear, traditional case-solving methods are useless, so the focus can only be on the criminal, and criminal profiling has emerged as a result. This channel posts a variety of cases every day. If you're interested, be sure to hit that subscribe button and like the content. It's the best support you can offer. While criminal profiling is often associated with serial killers, it is actually applicable to all unknown perpetrators, such as serial rapists, arsonists, and kidnapping cases like the one involving Sharon. Ultimately, criminal profiling relies on statistics, such as serial killers are basically male and victims are mostly female, with the motive often rooted in sexual desire. Because these criminals are masked figures hidden in the shadows, the purpose of profiling is to provide the most probable conclusion. What kind of person is most likely to be the perpetrator? However, since each criminal has their own personality, even the most accurate profile is bound to have some deviation. Moreover, criminal profiling is more of an auxiliary and consultative tool. From establishing a profile to capturing the perpetrator, it often takes months or even years, not like in TV shows where a simple data search can easily catch the real culprit. Or it could be said that profiling can tell the police what kind of person they are looking for, but finding this person requires other criminal investigation methods. The first full-time profiler at the FBI was an agent named John Douglas. When Sharon was kidnapped, he was in charge of the newly established BOW department as the chief profiler. After carefully studying the relevant physical evidence and all the phone recordings, he and other agents made a 22-point profile of the unknown killer, which I summarize as follows. 1. The killer is a white male, around 30 years old, with a criminal record. The age and gender of the killer are mainly judged based on big data. According to statistics, more than half of serial killers commit their first crime between their early 20s and early 30s. This age is not only the peak of physical strength, but also the peak of male sexual levels in cases driven by sexual desire. Additionally, the older the victim, the younger the perpetrator is usually because young criminals lack confidence and experience, often choosing vulnerable groups such as elderly people living alone. In contrast, criminals in their prime of physical strength tend to prefer victims in late adolescence and early adulthood. Of course, there are also serial killers who start killing in their 40s and 50s, but these late bloomers are mostly delayed, such as being imprisoned for several years for other crimes before evolving into serial killers. For this reason, profiling the age of the criminal is actually the most error-prone part. Most criminals with sexual motives choose victims of their own race because human sexual desire is usually directed towards people of the same race. In this case, the killer obviously had a sexual motive for Sharon, and he is most likely a white male of the same race as Sharon. The killer's handling of the timing, location, and details of the body disposal shows a high level of counter-surveillance skills. This sophistication and caution not only indicate that he is mentally mature, but also suggest that he has had similar rehearsals before, so it is very likely that the killer has a criminal record of a similar nature. 2. The killer is a local with a clean, new car and a slight obsession with cleanliness. From the method of the crime, this is an organized killer who had been stalking Sharon several times before the kidnapping, obviously having planned for a long time. The route he gave to Hilda was accurate, precise to every detail, indicating that he had returned to the scene of the body disposal multiple times for precise measurements. The choice of the location for body disposal and the location for making phone calls also shows that he is very familiar with the area, knowing secluded and uninhabited places and abandoned houses, and it is almost certain that the killer is a local. When calling the Smith family, there were several times when the killer was interrupted, and he would start over, repeating what he had said before, which also indicates that these lines were pre-written and read from a script before making the call, so as to quickly clarify the key points and hang up the phone to prevent tracking. This person has a slight obsession with cleanliness, is accustomed to taking notes, and likes to list everything, and once interrupted, he has to start over. Because he needs to stalk and visit remote areas for investigation multiple times, the killer must have his own car. This car will also reflect the owner's personality, very clean, well-maintained, and very new. 3. The killer is a sexual sadist, and all actions are based on power, domination, manipulation, and control. A sexual sadist is someone who becomes sexually excited by inflicting pain on a victim or witnessing the suffering of others. Mild sexual sadists will look for a willing masochist, and this sadistic behavior is based on mutual consent, and their fear is simulated. However, severe sexual sadists want real fear, complete control, and destruction of another person's body, emotions, or psyche. It can be imagined that such a sexual sadist finds it difficult to find a willing partner, so they immerse themselves in intense fantasies for a long time, and when they finally put their fantasies into practice, the outcome for the victims is usually brutal injury or even death. Although the killer did indeed sexually assault Sharon, what really gave him pleasure was the fear of the victim and the victim's family. He played with their hope and pain, and this pleasure of manipulating others gave him an unprecedented sense of power. Although the killer often showed guilt and repentance when talking to the Smith family on the phone, this was just part of his psychological game. This is a cold-blooded, cruel, arrogant, and narcissistic person. His reference to God may be to mock Robert, who is a clergyman, or to shirk responsibility. More importantly, in his view, God is also at the mercy of the Smith family, because in the killer's heart, he is the real God. 4. The killer was married early, had a short and failed marriage, is overweight, works in a blue-collar job, and is likely an electrician. However, although this narcissistic killer is full of contempt for the world, deep down, he harbors a sense of insecurity and constant internal conflict. This case was his first opportunity to be a leader, and before that, his life was out of control in every aspect. He may be engaged in a low-paying blue-collar job and cannot gain a sense of social value from his work. Since the killer used a voice-altering device during the crime, he should have some knowledge of electronics and may be engaged in construction or manufacturing. From the way the killer abducted Sharon and his attitude when calling the Smith family, the killer may seem polite on the surface, even introverted and shy. He has no attraction to women, has suffered a series of rejections, feels inferior, and is likely overweight or has a bloated physique. Although the killer often uses terms like "we" on the phone and claims to be a friend of the Smith family, this is just his fantasy of having a connection with Sharon. In fact, if it were not for the violent means of kidnapping, he would never have any intersection with this talented and popular young beauty from a middle-class family. The killer has a particular fondness for power games with women. When he calls, he always demands to speak with Hilda and Dawn, but avoids the head of the household, Robert. This malicious pleasure derived from ruthlessly destroying and tormenting the perfect family likely stems from the killer's own failed family life and marriage. His avoidance of the perfect husband and father, Robert, may be because, deep down, he is unwilling to face the fact that he has failed as a father and husband. 5. The killer will act unusually in the near future and commit the crime again. After the crime, under the influence of mental stress and a sense of excitement, the killer will exhibit unusual behavior, such as excessive drinking, weight loss, irregular shaving, and so on. He will be eager to talk about the case, pay close attention to media reports, and collect related briefings. The killer is intoxicated by the sense of power and control over the victim's family and the police. The more reaction they have, the more satisfied the killer feels. However, as Shari's body is discovered, this sense of pleasure begins to gradually diminish. The killer will soon crave to relive this pleasure again, and he will kill again until the day he is caught. John Douglas told the Lexington County Police on the phone that the killer's next target would be someone who looks like Shari, such as Shari's sister. If he can't find a suitable target, he will randomly choose the most convenient victim. As he predicted, the second kidnapping occurred on June 14, 1985. 2 weeks had passed since Shari was kidnapped, and the entire state of South Carolina was on edge. Girls of the same age as Shari were uneasy, and parents did not allow them to go out alone. Even if the distance was short, they had to go in groups. Perhaps for this reason, the killer could not get close to the desired target, so he found a substitute, a 9-year-old girl named Deborah May Helmick. The Helmick family lived 24 miles from the Smiths in Richland County. The father, Sherwood, was a construction worker, and the mother, Deborah, worked in a barbecue restaurant. The couple had 3 children. The eldest daughter was named the same as her mother, and there was a younger brother and a younger sister. The Helmick family moved to South Carolina from Ohio 4 years ago. They initially lived with their elders, and a month ago, the family of 5 moved to Shiloh Trailer Housing Park, finally having a small home of their own. Around 4 p.m. on June 14th, Deborah was playing with her younger brother at the door, and her father, Sherwood, was taking care of the younger daughter in the house. A car suddenly sped up and stopped at Deborah's door. A man jumped out of the car, grabbed the screaming girl, and drove away. Sherwood and a neighbor quickly chased after them, but were a step too late. Just like Shari, Deborah was kidnapped in broad daylight and disappeared without a trace. However, this time they saw the kidnapper's appearance. He was a man in his 30s, about 5 feet 9 inches tall, weighing 210 pounds, driving a spotless, brand-new silver car. The sheriff of Richland County also immediately organized a large-scale search, but also without any results. He quickly informed the Lexington County police. Although Deborah May was only 9 years old, she, like Shari, was a pretty girl with blonde hair and blue eyes. The modus operandi of the 2 cases was the same, and the witness's description of the perpetrator was also consistent with the FBI's profile. The Lexington County Police were convinced that the kidnapper of Deborah May was the person they were looking for. The police from the 2 counties began to work together to solve the case. John Douglas also rushed to South Carolina with his subordinates. In Shari's case, the killer called the Smith family, so the police also installed telephone tracking and recording equipment at the Helmick family's home. However, several days passed, and the kidnapper did not contact the Helmick family at all. Because Deborah was not the killer's ideal target, perhaps in his view, such a substandard victim's family did not even have the qualification to talk to him. Because Deborah did not satisfy him, the killer is bound to look for a new victim. John Douglas decided that they must take the initiative and set a trap for the killer to expose himself as soon as possible. John Douglas's plan was to hold a memorial service at the Lexington Memorial Cemetery where Shari was buried. The Smith family would attend the service, and Dawn would place one of Shari's stuffed toys in front of her grave. Since Shari's kidnapping was the killer's masterpiece, he couldn't resist the urge to visit the scene to admire his handiwork. After the ceremony, the killer was likely to sneak back to the cemetery to take the stuffed toy as a souvenir of Shari. Of course, doing so would undoubtedly put Dawn in danger. Robert and Hilda were extremely worried and reluctant to put their only remaining daughter in danger, but brave Dawn agreed without hesitation. Before setting up the trap, the FBI and the police approached local media to explain how to report on the matter correctly to avoid provoking the killer. On the afternoon of June 21st, the memorial service was officially held. Local residents spontaneously came from all directions to mourn sincerely, while Sheriff Metz and his team quietly recorded the license plates of all passing vehicles. However, Shari's grave was too close to the main road and lacked seclusion, so the FBI agents worried that the cautious killer might not take the risk to retrieve the stuffed toy. After the memorial service, the police closely monitored the cemetery, but sadly, the killer did not show up. Instead, he called the Smith family again. Just after midnight, Dawn received another call from Shari Faye Smith. This time, the killer was even more arrogant, not even using a voice changer. He spoke in his own voice, slowly telling Dawn, "You know, God wants you to join Shari Faye. It's just a matter of time. This month, next month, this year, next year. You can't be protected all the time." Faced with the killer's blatant threat, Dawn still tried to maintain rationality and calmly continue the conversation. Then the killer asked, "Have you heard of Deborah May Helmick?" No." Dawn tried to buy time. Next, the killer gave Dawn a detailed set of directions, as meticulous as the one in Shari's case, and finally said, "Deborah May is waiting there. May God forgive us all." On June 22nd, the police followed the killer's directions and found Deborah May's severely decomposed body in the dense shrubs on the side of the dirt road. Like Shari, she was killed within 12 hours of being kidnapped, also by asphyxiation. In this way, the killer once again mocked the police and escaped unscathed. However, his days of playing God were about to end, because the most critical piece of evidence in this case was discovered on the suicide note Shari wrote before her death. As mentioned earlier, Shari's suicide note was quickly sent to the South Carolina Law Enforcement Crime Laboratory for analysis, but no useful conventional evidence was found. However, the forensic doctors were not willing to give up. They racking their brains to think if there was any other way to obtain evidence from this letter. Suddenly, a forensic doctor had an idea and thought of a new device called an electrostatic detection apparatus. The electrostatic detection apparatus, also known as a static detection device, is used to display indentations on paper. Since Shari's suicide note was written on yellow notepad paper, the forensic doctors speculated that these two sheets of paper should have been torn from the killer's own notes. If they were lucky, they might be able to detect the content written on the previous pages of these two sheets of the letter. Eventually, on these two sheets of paper, the forensic doctors found two distinguishable traces of writing. One was a shopping list, and the other was a series of numbers 205837138. 205 is the area code for Alabama, and 837 is the local code for Huntsville. The police of both counties immediately checked all possible numbers and quickly locked onto one number that had made multiple calls to the same residence in Lexington County. The police dialed the number, and a young man answered the phone. The police asked him if he had any connections to South Carolina. The young man was calm and told the police that he was serving in the Army and would occasionally call his parents who lived in Lexington County. His father was named Ellis Shepard, an electrician who lived in a house 15 miles away from the Smith family. Deputy Sheriff Louis McCutcheon of Lexington County immediately took a few of his men and went straight to Ellis Shepard's home. But when he saw the Shepards, he couldn't help but be disappointed. The Shepards were over 50 years old, friendly and hospitable, with a happy and fulfilling marriage. Apart from being a white electrician, they didn't match the profile at all. Moreover, during the two kidnappings, the couple was on vacation, but McCutcheon didn't give up. The witness's description of the perpetrator in the Deborah May case also made him believe in the accuracy of the FBI's profile. So he began to recite the profile to the Shepards in detail and asked if they knew such a person. During the recitation, the Shepards' expressions became more and more serious. Finally, they looked at each other and said a name in unison. Larry Gene Bell. Larry Gene Bell was born in 1949, 36 years old at the time of the crime, born in Ralph, Alabama, the fifth of 5 children, and moved frequently. Bell attended high school in South Carolina, then moved to Mississippi, where he attended a technical school and became an electrician. He then returned to South Carolina, married, and had children at a young age. It is said that his ex-wife was also blonde and blue-eyed, and was only 15 years old when she married him. In 1970, Bell joined the Marine Corps, but he retired less than a year later. He then found a job at the Columbia Correctional Department, but was fired after only a month. In 1976, he divorced his wife, who obtained full custody of their son. The Shepherds told the police that Bell was shy, burly, and Ellis Shepard's assistant responsible for wiring when renovating the house. He was meticulous and organized in his work. During the Shepherds' vacation, Bell took care of their house. Mrs. Shepard remembered that she had left her son's phone number for Bell in case something came up during their vacation, which was the origin of the mysterious phone number. The Shepherds also told the police that when they returned from vacation, Bell had picked them up from the airport. When they saw Bell, the couple was shocked because he had lost a lot of weight and was unshaven and very nervous. In retrospect, all the way back from the airport, Bell had been talking about the missing Smith girl. To make sure, McCutcheon played the recording of the last call from the killer and then asked the Shepherds if this was Bell's voice. The Shepherds nodded firmly, no doubt. On June 27, 1985, 28 days after Sharon was kidnapped, Larry Gene Bell was arrested by the police when he left home for work in the morning. Sheriff Metz searched Bell's home, where he found his shoes neatly arranged under the bed and his workbench spotless. The police discovered a large collection of pornographic publications with themes of slavery and abuse. On Bell's bed, they found 6 strands of blonde hair, and the postage stamps in his desk drawer matched exactly with those on the envelopes sent to the Smith family. Metz also checked the vehicle license plates from the day of the memorial service, and Bell's car was indeed among them. The police pulled Bell's criminal record, revealing that he had previously been arrested for telephone harassment of women. He had also attempted to kidnap a female student for which he served 5 years in prison. The police suspected him of being involved in 2 other cases of women going missing. In February 1986, Bell was tried for the murder of Shari Smith. During the 6-hour trial, he shouted and made bizarre statements such as, "Mona Lisa is a man," attempting to convince the jury that he had mental issues and in the spirit of religion should be shown mercy. Fortunately, no one bought into his act. After only 47 minutes, the jury reached a verdict and sentenced Bell to death. In 1987, Bell was tried again for the kidnapping and murder of Deborah May. Deborah's father, Sherwood, attended the entire trial, silently staring fiercely at Bell. The jury rendered the same verdict: guilty on both counts, death penalty. On October 4, 1996, after spending 10 years on death row, 46-year-old Bell took his seat in the electric chair. He was the last prisoner to be executed by electric chair in South Carolina. The Smith family was determined not to let sorrow dominate their lives, as their daughter had hoped in her will, wishing to live day by day. Years later, Robert said in an interview that Cherie's letter had given him endless strength, even more meaningful than any form of judgment. It was their daughter from heaven, giving them her final admonitions and entrustments. In 1986, Dawn participated in the Miss South Carolina pageant, an adventure Shari had always encouraged her to pursue. She won the championship and went on to place second in the Miss America pageant in 1987. She is now a well-known Christian singer, songwriter, and motivational speaker. Hilda wrote a book called Shari's Roses in memory of her daughter, which was published in 2001 and received widespread acclaim from readers. 2 years later, Hilda passed away at the age of 61. This channel posts a variety of cases every day. If you're interested, be sure to hit that subscribe button and like the content. It's the best support you can offer.